I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
This is real action, and you can't be real action for long without Chuck Norris. And what better place to start than his most iconic franchise with a title we obviously love missing in action. Arriving in 1984, it was a time when moviegoers were hot for post-Vietnam War fantasy stories about hardened soldiers, forever changed by the battlefield they can never truly escape. Norris, who had moved on to his superior bearded look at this point, plays James Braddock, a Vietnam vet and POW who had managed to escape his imprisonment. But years later, he's still determined to find the men who were still held captive. After years spent off the grid, Braddock decides to take part in a diplomatic mission to Vietnam where the government insists, with mustache-twirling insincerity, that no such POWs still exist. I mean, come on, it wouldn't be a movie if they were telling the truth, right? Missing in Action is a reflection of a very specific time in America, following the Vietnam War, a war which was perceived as an embarrassing defeat for the US. A lot of people couldn't believe such a thing could happen, and yearned for movies that made them feel good about the war. But there was also resentment towards returning soldiers, and just as John Rambo would face it in his own movies, so too does Braddock, whose claims of more POW camps are questioned by the national press. I mean, look at what he does to this TV. What did it ever do to you? The talks are a disaster, of course. Braddock can't even be bothered to dress up for the occasion. The State Department reps, including the sexy Anne Fitzgerald, played by Lenora Kasdorf, don't appreciate it. And what's worse, Braddock refuses to shake hands with General Tran, played by the legendary James Hong, and makes eye contact with the menacing Vin, who he recognizes as the man who tortured him in the POW camp. It's all downhill from there as bullied locals are forced to claim Braddock was held as a criminal and not an actual hostage. A proposed nightcap with Fitzgerald goes about as well as expected. Do you mind? I'm a bit shy. Despite the champagne and her willingness, Braddock uses her as cover so he can slip into the night and stalk down General Tran and force him to reveal the POW camp's location. It goes badly, but at least Braddock gets in some target practice, though right in the gut. Missing in Action is considered by many action fans to be the least of the trilogy, but I disagree. First of all, they're all pretty great, making this one of the best action franchises ever. But I like this one because it's slightly ironic and funny. The sight of Chuck Norris, legendary for how tough he is, watching Spider-Man cartoons in his hotel room is pretty nutty. Who knew Norris was a fan of the Wallcrawler? Humor pops up in the oddest places, but not quite as odd as this bad guy who was really hopeful Braddock would hurry up and change clothes. I mean, yo, how long were you in there? We also get one of the all-time great sidekicks in Tucker, played by the great M. Emmett Walsh, who is Braddock's hard-partying, Thailand hooker-loving pal is a real blast. M. Emmett Walsh rolling around in bed with a couple of ladies of the night? How can you not love this guy? He's shady as hell too, which is why Braddock needs his help. Only Tucker would know where Braddock can get the gear he needs to assault the POW camp. Like this awesome boat made out of Kevlar. This thing is a goddamn piece of work. Look at the way dude is practically wetting himself just trying to talk it up.
Quite a unique weapon, eh? She can run 60 miles an hour. And with her mufflers on, no one can hear you coming.
Of course, Chuck Norris doesn't pay full price for anything.
Dan.
Deal.
The entire time, Braddock is pursued by Vin, and there are a couple of decent action scenes from director Joseph Zito, who was new to the genre, having just helmed Friday the 13th, the final chapter. There's a pretty good chase scene on the Thai docks where Braddock uses a truck as a battering ram, and Vin, who has grown desperate enough to attack Braddock with an axe, puts up a pretty good fight in a nocturnal scrap on a boat. But most people will remember Missing in Action for the bookending battles. The first, a wild fever dream sequence with Braddock emerging out of the Vietnam forests, gun blazing, double fisting grenades in an attempt to save his squad. The latter finds Braddock back in reality, and also back in Vietnam, with action that spans the high seas to the jungles. The Kevlar raft, which somebody took the time to paint sharks on, is worth every penny. The body count is astro-frickin-nomical, as Braddock and even Tucker mow down the Vietnamese army and rescue their boys, all to fly back to Saigon and butt in on another press conference. Wait, they did all of this for 4 hostages? That's not enough to field a basketball team with.
Spider-Man put me in that hole, Barcroft, and now I'm going to get even.
Missing in Action was the first of Norris's 5-picture deal with Cannon, worth $5 million in total. That might not seem like a lot now, but it was crazy money back then, and it caused some friction behind the scenes between studio heads and cousins Menahem Golan and Yorm Globus. But Cannon, who we could probably do an entire series on, was tremendously successful with Norris, and Missing in Action in particular. They just knew how to make the most out of guys like him, Michael Dudikoff, Charles Bronson, and Sho Kosugi. You could always count on at least one iconic moment from each film that would stand out most. And for Missing in Action, who can forget that scene of Braddock rising up out of the water like an aquatic god of vengeance? Norris had his mind made up to make his own Vietnam War movie, and hooked up with writer Lance Houle to pen the script. But Cannon had their own script for another film titled Missing in Action. Since nobody wanted to make Norris and Houle's film, they struck a deal with Cannon to shoot both back to back, and release them in canonical order, one in which Braddock is in captivity and escapes, the second about his return to free the POWs. But Cannon liked Missing in Action better, so they flipped it and released this one first in 1984, with the prequel, Missing in Action: The Beginning, arriving a year later. Houle would go on to direct that prequel, while a true sequel, Braddock: Missing in Action 3, arrived in 1988, directed by Chuck Norris's brother Aaron. The Missing in Action films were pretty big hits for Cannon, and I'm pretty sure they would still be around if they had stuck with making modest action flicks rather than their fanciful, expensive ventures, many of which failed. But that's a story for another day. Norris became one of the cornerstones of the studio and, of course, the entire industry. Ultimately, the decision to release Missing in Action first was a smart one. It's a film that has truly withstood the test of time. While some disregard Missing in Action and look to its more action-heavy sequels, both awesome in their own right, I'm not sure the franchise would have clicked with fans without grounding Braddock in reality first, which this film does. Missing in Action was panned by critics, with many saying it was riding the Rambo wave. While clearly inspired by James Cameron's Rambo First Blood Part 2 script that was making the Hollywood rounds, Missing in Action has its own message. And, of course, it has Chuck Norris. Nobody would dare compare Missing in Action to Rambo. At least not to Chuck Norris's face, anyway. Because everyone knows, when the lights go out, the boogeyman checks his closet for Chuck Norris. Missing in Action gets 8 out of 10 Stallones. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our channel, tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.